Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, April 17th, 2024. We respectfully acknowledge that the land, just one moment while we get the technology. Thank you, no problem, thanks. We respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather and work is the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this beautiful land. So before we begin, there are no late items this evening. If I can get a motion to approve the agenda for April 17th. Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on the agenda this evening? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes, thank you. We have no delegations this evening. We have adoption of the regular council meeting minutes from the meeting on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024 to be adopted. It's been moved. If I can get a seconder. Seconded, and I'll just remind, we'll use our mic since we're on live YouTube world, please. Any questions or comments on the council meeting minutes from April 3rd? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously, thank you. Moving on to page 8, we have the Strategic Planning Committee meeting minutes from Wednesday, April 10th to be received, if I can get a motion. Moved and seconded, thank you. Any questions on the Strategic Planning Committee meeting minutes? All those in favor to be received? Opposed? That passes unanimously, thank you. Moving on to page 10, we have the consent agenda. I'll have a motion for A to I to be received. It's moved by Councillor Grant, seconded, thank you. And all those in favor of receiving the consent agenda? Opposed? And that passes. So now if you have one item you would like to pull out, you just need a seconder on that item. So do any councillors have consent agenda to be pulled out? Councillor Blacklock.
With your approval, I'd like to pull out item E.
Second.
And then all I'd like to say is I'd just like to ask to staff where we're at with this request for an additional place and time or place. I know the fire hall is planning an event, but will we have additional yard waste drop off given that it's the time of year where people are doing a lot of gardening?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Blacklock. Over to CAO Wall.
Thank you. We've been working with MTerra to see if there were any solutions that we can find with them. Within the contract, it does provide for the ability to do limited time period, unlimited pickups. It's very expensive though. We're looking at $50,000 to $60,000 per week to provide that to the community. We have spoken with Vancouver Island Enterprises next to the airport to see if we can arrange a discounted drop-off for organics, and so we're working with them to have that in place. What we are finding though is that when this was initially announced by the City of Courtenay, we kind of got a flurry of emails in saying, hey, we would like this to be provided, but we aren't actually getting calls in with people telling us that they don't have enough capacity. The people that we have spoken to, we've informed them we are looking for other solutions, but they do have the ability to just go to Vancouver Island Enterprises right now and drop their material off. And we've also shared the chipping event that the fire hall is hosting as well. So everything appears to be going fairly well. If we do see a large number of people that are saying that they're not having enough capacity, we can respond. But the people that we're talking to are informing us, hey, we don't have enough capacity now, but in a couple of weeks we're going to be fine. And so when we take a look at the dollar amounts in getting, the one-time unlimited pickup, it starts to get very expensive. And Courtenay is seeing issues with the drop-off. People coming in, doing it safely, the amount of contamination, the amount that they're having to pay in tipping fees. So right now, things do appear to be going fairly well in Comox, and if we do move towards providing a solution, it'll probably be a subsidized drop-off at Vancouver Island Enterprises.
Thanks for that update. Any other councillors have items from the consent agenda to be pulled out? I'd just like to really quickly pull out D, which is Rachel Blaney's notice of not running. Thank you very much. I just want to publicly thank our MP Blaney, who has been serving on Vancouver Island North since 2008. in a variety of political roles, and just truly wish her all the best. She'll be there for another year, but I know she's been a fierce advocate for a variety of groups and people, including seniors in our community, specifically in the town of Comox. So I just want to send our official wishes for Rachel on that. And if I can also just pull out G, if there is a seconder, that's on our parks, thank you. There was a awesome letter from a member of the public just saying how much they appreciated our Parks Department as well as the work specifically of Robbie Null. So I just want to acknowledge the great work that they are doing, enough to get a formal letter from a citizen about their work in the McDonald Wood, and the society there wanted to thank Robbie. So thank you so much to all parks and for Robbie on that. And lastly, I just have one more item to pull out on the letter from Ravi Kahlon on Bill 16 legislation.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett. I just wanted to check over with staff on this. We've had a couple of very brief conversations on it, but would we expect that council will need to look at the stratification option on new development, let's say up in the Pritchard area on they're asking us to allow stratification, which would mean multiple owners on one single family lot? Or is that something that if council doesn't highlight, it would just be allowed by, I'm just wondering how stratification will come into play and when, if at all. If I can get a seconder, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Blacklock. Over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Minions. I want to acknowledge that you asked me that question a few days ago, and I don't have an answer for you yet. I will find out about that and report back.
That sounds good. I know it's a relatively new topic in the last couple of weeks, but hearing some other municipalities and being at a conference recently where they were mostly talking about housing, it also came up there. So it seems to be a topic municipalities are discussing differently. Councillor Blacklock.
Well, I just only wanted to make sure that we're precise in our speaking around that, because a property can have multiple owners. You're talking about making a strata property multiple titles.
Correct, thank you for that. Multiple title owners versus, yeah, thank you. Where one would be sellable versus just rentable by the one titled owner or two. Thank you. Good clarification. Okay, so future conversation as we continue about housing, it seems to be a decision point for council to make, or if we leave it, then stratification would be allowed, I believe, but I'm not sure. Okay, that leaves all consent agenda items done. We're moving on to unfinished business. We have the 2024 council funding requests update on page 27. There is a report there. And we have the two items left for this year that are outstanding from the Community Policing Crime Stoppers asking for $10,850 and from the Coalition to End Homelessness for $40,000. And there's some new information that got sent into how the organizations they've requested serve the Caravan Society and the two Stepping Stones serve Comox. And before we kind of get into each of those two items, I just wanted to update staff as advised sometime likely in early to mid-June, we'll be getting a report back on how we currently look at those funding requests and how we could look at them moving forward. So kind of a more formal policy option on that. And so I would just encourage that we look at the expectation of these organizations that funding was likely secure for this year. But of course, we'll get into a conversation on each of those items. So if I can have a recommendation that we receive the report from April 17th, 2024 for receipt for information, which is the recommendation, or an alternate recommendation from page 27. Moved by Councillor Grant, thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Haslett. Questions or comments on the recommendations on page 27? It looks like we have Councillor Haslett and then Councillor Swift, please.
So mine's with respect to the Comox Valley Citizens on Patrol. I did appreciate that they came into council chambers last week and gave us a bit of an outline on the work that they do around the community. There are a couple things I'd like to see in the future from groups when they come to Comox looking for me. I'd like to know how the money's being spent that we're potentially offering, as well as have a better look at the budget. With a bit of the discussion there, it sounded like the Citizens on Patrol did have a bit of money, and I would like to know that the groups that we are funding have a dire need for the money that's coming along. It's not something that we're just doing year over year just because it's been that way in the past. And that's
Points well taken. I think that's something we're also concerned about without knowing where the money is specifically going to and what we're kind of putting into the savings necessarily. Councillor Swift, and then Councillor Blacklock after. Nope, Councillor Swift.
Thank you. It was interesting to hear from that group, and I think that is something that we should make part of the policy every year. If they want money, they need to come and talk about it and to see a budget, because if I'm recalling correctly, the fellow that was speaking about the Citizens on Patrol said their operating budget was 18,000. And so if that's the case, we are really taking a big chunk of this, their operating budget. Also, I'm not entirely sure what the difference between the Crime Stoppers and the Citizens on Patrol groups are, whether they're all rolled into one or what the intersection of those two groups is. So I feel like we're too far down the path to do anything much about it this year, but I think we need to be having a greater due diligence when we're spending that kind of money.
Thanks for those comments. And over to staff, will the report coming in June kind of go over what our key requirements for reporting would be, or will it just have some it'll be more interim than that? What do you anticipate the report would include for us?
I believe, I'm not that far down the road, but I think what we'll do is we'll bring you a draft policy and then you can make changes, and the draft policy will have an application form with different requirements of information for submission, and so you can take a look and see if those forms and policies meet your needs. But I think what we'll have for you in June will be a pretty complete policy that could be adopted in the meeting, and then subsequent to that, any changes that council would direct.
Thank you very much. Would it also include the in-kind items in that?
No, this would generally be a cash.
Cash.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Grant?
Yeah, so just onto the coalition, I think that when we set up the coalition and told them that we would give them money, the money was meant to go for capital projects. And the rationale is that we want to see them building things and have housing built. And of course, it looks as though this is going more to administration and other things now. So I'd like to just really get that straightened out with them, that, you know, they had a lot of things in their report that were capital that they could have easily put this into, but I think that it's important that it stay that way. And I agree with you, they should have to come and bring their budget and show us what they're doing with the money. But I'd just like to, for this year, I think it's fine, but I think in the future, we need to get back to the basics and get back to capital projects with them.
Thanks for the feedback. I think it'll be easier once we have a policy to kind of invite people back for that delegation and even have those once-a-year meetings to say, what's the budget, where specifically is this going to? Something that's seeing the doors open for sure. So note taken on that. And they have provided kind of the organizations they're going to this year, but they are a little bit different in structure. So I believe, just over to get clarification from staff, we're receiving the report and then we're good to go over each item individually with recommendations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so on the council funding requests updated information for receipt, is there any more questions on that report? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously, thank you. So we're on to Brian McKay, Comox Valley Citizens on Patrol. Request for support, which the amount was in that funding request, I believe it was 10,850. Is there a motion for Citizens on Patrol? Moved by Councillor Grant, thank you, and a seconder?
One second.
Seconded by Councillor Kerr. Any new questions or comments in regards to that funding? I have noted that we are looking for a budget and kind of more information about how much we're funding of the total in the future. Councillor Swift, of course.
I guess the other issue is that this is a valley-wide, they operate in a valley, so it wasn't necessarily Comox that was getting the service. So that's another concern of mine, but I guess we'll just carry on for this year.
Yeah, I think it was a regional service for sure. And we kind of got verbal updates on when they're in Comox, but we don't have a real clear picture of how often in numbers. I don't believe with what they did. Yeah.
I think that these two requests came rather late in the game, and of course it really talks to why they should have to come and see us first so we can make a more proper decision. I think it's too late to pull the funding for either one of them right now, but in future I think we need to get them in before we get our budgets going and find out exactly what we're going to do with it.
I think this is the reason we need the policy is we've been giving out some of these grants for a long time, and we just need to look a little more closer about why we're doing those grants as they are. Councillor Blacklock.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the comment I'm gonna make, is that you know, it seems to be kind of year over year an expectation without even talking to us that these funds will just continue when, you know, we look at what's the operations here to do? It's to end homelessness, and yet homelessness persists and it's getting worse. So you double down and increase the funding to 80,000 a year, or do you say, let's try something else that maybe will actually work? Like advocate to the provincial government to take on the responsibilities they have to their citizens and not download the continuing costs onto us here at the town level. So that's my position on it. And like I said, I don't want to be the bad person who pulls this thing, pulls the rug out from under the caravan, but you know, the expectation that the town is going to just fund this in perpetuity is, I think, mistaken. Thank you.
Thanks. We are on policing Crime Stoppers, but maybe it's the same sentiment overall about where funding goes for that. We'll have those comments over. So on community policing Crime Stoppers, we have a motion on the floor to, for this year, approve 10,850, knowing we have a policy and possibly a different approach, but we're not sure what that is yet. Councillor Haslett.
In the event that this passes, I'd just like to confirm that when a letter goes out to the group, that we also state that we're looking at funding in the future, and that this isn't going to go on necessarily for forever, but we're going to look at things year over year.
I believe that's the intent, but over to staff. Should we have the motion updated to say that it's very specifically in the letter? Okay, Councillor Grant. Oh,
So can I
sorry.
just ask, does the motion right now include a letter, or is it just the funding?
We've talked about the letter quite a bit around the table, but no motion has been made that specifically says ensure in a letter that they know there's a new policy coming and that this is not funding in perpetuity, that it's
So that would be
one
good
time.
to get that in a specific motion. At your last time you spoke about this, council directed a letter to go to some specific organizations, so doing that here would be a good idea.
Okay, so back to Councillor Grant, if you mind a friendly.
Well, I don't mind, but I think maybe we could pass all these and then have a further motion to send a letter, to do the letter.
Yeah, and I do think it should actually go to everybody, so
Yeah, that's right.
let's do it that way. Over to Charlie.
Could I just
Yes,
get the wording of the actual motion on the table?
Sure. The motion was from Councillor Grant, and the motion on the table at this moment is that council approve the funding request from the Comox, now going by memory, but Comox Policing Crime Stoppers, Community Policing Crime Stoppers for 10,000. I'm not sure that's the right wording that's in the report there. Cops, yeah, for 10,850, and then the motion ends there on this motion on the floor. Okay, so I think let's go with the funding requests and then doing a third motion at the end. I think that's good. So all those in favor of approving the 10,850? Opposed? That passes unanimously, thank you. So we're moving on to the funding for the Coalition to End Homelessness for $40,000. This is the kind of fund that we have had the control of every year, having a discussion around the table at Comox, and we're meeting the kind of per household, per door cost of around $6 per resident to contribute to the coalition. In past, they've opened, I think, close to 300 doors. At the moment, they're looking at using our funds for different services like the Caravan and Stepping Stone and a couple others they indicated in their budget. And so the intent is that we will also be looking at this policy and how we get the information, when we get the information, et cetera. But I do think in past years, they really have had some success. And I would hope if we were making any changes, we would have that discussion in advance of kind of when the funding request came in. So if someone wants to make a motion
So I'll
for
move that we
Coalition.
grant Comox Valley Coalition to end homelessness $40,000.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. That's been moved and seconded. And any questions or comments on that? Councillor Swift.
I guess it's just the same comments that have rather been made when this began. The coalition itself were a bunch of organizations getting together and trying to create more housing options for people in the community. And we didn't opt into the service at the regional district level because we wanted to have control over which projects we actually funded. And so they were always capital projects. And I can see that the need is great and the work that the Caravan does is really useful, but I'm thinking that the Island Health would probably be a better funder for the types of services they're providing. I will support this for this year, but going forward, I'm really hoping that we'll devote these monies to capital, because we're not getting any more roofs over heads here.
Sounds like we probably also just need more delegations and information, and it's hard for us to make it to all of their coalition meetings, but I know they are still working on some operational getting doors open, but there's a bit of a gap from some of the changeovers in that organization. So any other comments before we go to vote on the coalition and homelessness? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And now looking for if there's a new motion about a letter to go out about. I can make a motion.
Yeah, well, I can make a motion if you want.
Council-
Would be that we
Councilor Grant.
send a letter outlining the fact that we're going to be updating our policy and that there could be some changes coming.
Okay, and just for one point of clarity, would it be on all the approved?
For every, yeah, for
Yeah,
all.
some of them have gone out already,
Yeah.
but just a reiteration to all funding
Yeah.
groups.
Strong letter call.
And I don't know that we have to have a date attached, so I'll leave that. Any questions or comments, or sorry, we need a seconder on Ken's motion. Sorry, Councillor Grant's motion. Seconded by Councillor Hazlitt. Questions or comments on a letter going out just to update organizations that we are looking at our policy for these sponsorships or funding? All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So we are moving on to bylaw adoptions. On page 29, we have the rezoning application RZ 23-5, the zoning amendment to permit a liquor store at 69 Anderton Road, which is the relocation. The motion is that Comox zoning amendment bylaw number 1850.41 be adopted. Move the motion. Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on that adoption? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We're now on page 36 for the 2024 tax rate settings. We are looking at 4 motions there. So we'll look at the first one, that council approved the tax rate bylaw to be created with an increase in revenue of 5.47 for residential properties on the general municipal levy.
I'll move that.
It's been motioned by Councillor Grant and seconded by Councillor Hazlitt. Questions or comments on the residential property general levy of 5.47? Councillor Kerr.
Thanks to Edward and all staff that were involved with putting this together. I was actually kind of shocked by how low the number is, which I think would be a pleasant surprise to our residents. I guess the question for staff is comparing this to other communities that have tax increases expected to be 14-15% across the province in many jurisdictions. How is our number so low? It is, any explanation that you might be able to provide our residents would be helpful.
Say a lot.
Thank you. So there's a couple factors. One, I think that staff have done a really good job in making sure that we don't have superfluous spending and that we're focused on the core service provision within the town. And so I think a lot of credit does go towards, our staff from the front line up to managers who are ensuring that we're serving the community in an efficient manner. Another factor that runs into this is it's very hard to compare percentages in different municipalities because everybody calculates these numbers differently. I think one of the first questions when you're looking at comparing across municipalities is to ask how they're funding their infrastructure. So a number that's low or high doesn't mean anything if one, if the number is high and is funding infrastructure and the number that's low is not, it's not an apples to apples comparison. So the people like to talk about those percentages comparing across municipalities, and I think that's just a really difficult thing to do, and I'm not sure it actually provides any sort of realistic comparison between jurisdictions.
Yeah, I know, I asked,
Councillor Grant.
I asked Courtney last night at our meeting what their tax rate was gonna be, and they said it was 7 point something. But then there was this lengthy explanation that came after it, which I didn't really follow what they were talking about. So, when I said, well, we're 5.47, and then they went, what? And then I went, but, right? So there's always the but at the end, right? So it's you're right, it's really difficult to do it that way.
Councillor Blacklock.
And just to staff, when we talk about the representative household in Comox, are we talking about the median assessed Class 1 residential property? Are we talking about the average assessed Class 1 residential property? And what is that number?
It's a home worth $780,000.
Other questions or comments for the residential, Councillor Blacklock?
And then if we took in real terms of the amount of increase for our residential property owners, 5.47%, does that include the 5170 infrastructure levy or is that separate? So in real terms, it is a little higher. Very good.
It's the plus, yeah, 5.47 plus.
That's the but.
That's the
Not
but,
the conversation.
That's where Councillor Grant was alluding to.
Yeah.
I prefer the days when we were able to stick to inflation around the 3 or 4%, but I know that staff has done an incredible job this year, specifically with getting as much grant funding in, with keeping departments as absolutely lean as possible, with things functional as they can be. So looking at what the projects we have been able to get done and looking at what we were able to keep it to, it kind of is what it is on keeping the community at that level of service that we want it to be and strive it to be. So thank you to all of Finance and CAO Wall for getting it at this level, although I found it, it's not what they used to be, but it is where we need it to be to keep services running and keeping our rec center and all parks and all the things we really love and enjoy in Comox going. So thank you for staff for that. Other questions or comments before we vote on the 5.47 residential? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously, thank you. We are looking at number 2, which the council approved the tax rate bylaw to be created with an increase in revenue of 5% for business properties on the general municipal levy.
I'll move that.
It's moved and a seconder. Second. Any questions or comments on business properties at 5%? Councillor Grant.
I do have a question. I'm
Councillor
just
Swift.
wondering, the way you've calculated this is far different than the way we would normally do it. Normally, you would get your tax rate and there would be a multiplier that would get you your commercial tax rate, and this is a little bit different way. So how do we get to a 5% for commercial rather than a higher number than residential?
So the percentage works with the multiplier. So the 5% is an increase on the total amount to collect from that class, which already includes the multiplier within.
Okay.
So it's probably based on some of the worksheets that we did last year and then 5% added. So we're using kind of the same decisions from last year.
Correct.
Councillor Blacklock.
So same question as residential. For this is only class 6 business and other properties as classified by BC assessment. So how many folios within the town of Comox are we talking about approximately? Approximately 229. Thank you, Jeff. So of those 229, what is the representative Class 6 property or the median value? I know you got that.
So we have an average, we don't have the representative, it's just much more difficult. Sure. With the wide range. Louis, what's the average business property worth?
$840. Okay. I'm also still learning how this works.
I've never heard that number, so it's interesting to hear. Close to residential. Other questions or comments on the increase in revenue to the business properties of 5% for the general municipal levy? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously, thank you. We're moving on to number 3, that council approve the tax rate bylaw to be created with an increase of 5% for light industrial properties on the general municipal levy. If I can get a mover.
That,
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or comments on the light industrial property levy of 5%? All those in favor? Did you have a question, Councillor Blacklock?
Quickly,
Okay, we're moving that vote.
which class of property, I believe this is Class 4 light industrial, or is it Class 5? 4, 5, thank you. And how many folios in Comox are Class 5 for 2024? I don't think it's very many, that's 4.
Four.
Very good.
Goal to have that increased.
we could use a whole bunch more.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, we can ask questions anytime also about these, and they'll send them out to all of us, which is a great way to do it also. Councillor Kerr.
Just looking at the pie chart on page 38. Again, we talk about this every year, how limited our light industrial industry is in town and how little it applies to our tax base. Because a increase of 0% would really not make a meaningful difference to our tax revenue. I'm wondering if that would maybe send a message that we would like to attract more industrial businesses to town. I know some work is being done in one area of town to maybe look at this. Is there any evidence for signaling with our tax rate that we'd like more light industrial business, or is that just not worthwhile doing?
You can get into those type of analysis. I do, without having done the analysis and speaking just with what I understand today, I would not believe that our light industrial tax rate is a deterrent to investment here. I believe the deterrent to investment here is simply that there has been no available land to develop. Once we see the developable land open up, if we were to start to see a lack of interest in the areas, I would take that as an indication that there may be something wrong and we should examine it. But what we've seen from the potential of land that may open up in the future is that there seems to be a large appetite for light industrial users to come and set up shop. We just need to get the land to the point where it can sustain it, or where we will allow building permits.
Great answer. Thank you, Stu.
Councillor Blacklock.
Well, I'll just point out to everyone that the part of the, we have signed on to the Chamber's Business Retention and Expansion Program. We've also just received an economic development report from our consultants that identifies the need for easily 65 acres of land in Comox to be used as, I don't want to say industrial land, because I think the word industrial implies the wrong thing. I would call it employment lands for people to work at. And certainly that's something that is important for the economic health of our community, and certainly our residential taxpayers will enjoy having more commercial businesses in town, as well as the taxes which those businesses generate for us. So just a reminder that those two strategies are coming up in 2024, 2025.
Thanks for those comments, and I agree, industrial property doesn't always envision what we're looking for there. Okay, so on the table, there is a motion for 5% for the light industrial properties to be future renamed. If I can, all those in favor of the 5% to industrial lands? Opposed? That passes unanimously, thank you. On number 4, we have that council approve the tax rate bylaws with an infrastructure renewal fund of $51.70 to the average business property on the general municipal levy. So just to specify, this is for the business parcels. We've already passed the residential levy of the 5170. This is to apply to business properties equal, and it's not a flat fee of 5170. It is based on the assessment value, hopefully that's the right term, or Councillor Blacklock will know.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Grant,
Second.
seconded. Questions or comments on the 5170 to an average business property on the business properties? All those in, Councillor Kerr, thank you.
Just a quick question on this. Given that our tax rate is so excellent compared to other municipalities, realizing that you can't always compare apples to oranges, I was wondering if, and the fact that council, we did want to see what our tax rate might be before making any major decisions. I was wondering if there's any appetite around the table to reinvestigate the residential 1 year, 5 year, 10-year discussion that we had earlier. I think we're in a great position. I think ripping the Band-Aid off quickly will prevent more bleeding later if we were to do that 1 year option on the residential rate, if that's even possible. Maybe that's a question for the CAO first.
I believe that would not be now, because we're talking about the 5170 to business, so we would vote on that.
It would,
and then if you wanted to
impact
bring
the
the motion.
business. It would impact the business, so I wanted to bring it up.
Okay,
Now-
so it's with the intention of it affecting the business, just to clarify. Possibly, so we'll talk around the table about this and also that possible addition. Councillor Grant.
Yeah, I think sometimes we've actually suckered ourselves in here to having a low tax rate when in fact we don't. The reality is we've taken infrastructure money out of our tax rate to make it appear lower than it actually is, and then added it back in as a line item. So I think if you look at our tax rates and try to compare them to others, would be either right in or possibly higher already. So I have no appetite to revisit that. I think that we've got it the way we want it now. We can always look at it next year.
I'm satisfied with where we left it, and I would say when we do add those two together, we are sitting very comparable, if not going above.
Thank you for humoring me there.
Go. Good discussion on that. Any questions or comments on 5170 to the average business property on the general municipal levy? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. And thanks again to staff and finance for getting these numbers worked out for us over the last 3 or 4 months. Moving on to page 41, we have the UBCM Asset Management Planning Program grant application, and the motion is there, but the council endorsed submission of a $50,000 grant to UBCM Asset Management Planning Program in order to obtain additional condition data on the town's sanitary sewer system, and that council support the town of Comox utilizing the grant and providing overall grant management if the funding application is successful. Moved. Seconded. Questions or comments on the grant application? We have full faith in grant applications. All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. There are no notices of motion and no late items. We'll go for reports from members of council, and just a reminder, it's just if you have any new information from boards or regional district that you would like to share. We won't go over different events or things we attended as councillors. I will go Councillor Blacklock and then to Councillor Swift, please.
I have nothing to share at tonight's meeting, sorry.
You don't have to be sorry. Kidding. Councillor Swift.
Thank you. Just that I attended the elected officials forum yesterday on tourism, and we learned of a grant program that was kind of flying under the radar. So we've asked them to come and do a presentation for us because it's really a festivals grant. And apparently Cumberland has really been doing well because they have somebody on the board that was aware of this possibility. So, you know, Philbert, Nautical Bays, there's all kinds of possibilities. Even, I was thinking even the BIA, I think BIA might have got one. But anyway, they're coming.
Thanks, Councillor Swift. Councillor Haslett.
I attended a Nautical Bays meeting today with Councillor Kerr. Everything's moving along well there. They've got quite a lot of participants already for the vendors. sounds like the food trucks are pretty darn full. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're also in search of the community right now to have members of the public join us for a non-phase community for next year. So you know what we would great in that. And that facet, please send it over to ourselves.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, there's a landing page where they're recruiting the committee members now. Thanks for sharing that. Councillor Kerr, Councillor Grant, and then Councillor Mayer, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So last week I attended the Parks and Trails open house. Thanks to staff for putting that together and actually for attending it. There were lots of staff there doing various jobs around the room, and it's really neat to see all the engagement and sticker boards being filled out and some of the interactive activities. So that was great. I can't wait to see that report when it comes. Last night was the elected officials forum that many of us attended with the focus on tourism. And we talked about the vision and strategic priorities of the Valley, but also we got our chance to put a few plugs in there for tourism in Comox as well, given our harbor and airport. We had a sewage commission meeting, CBRD recently. We talked about somewhat contentious issue of some air kiosks being put across the town where the sewer line is going, and we got some really good information from the engineers and technical people on the Sewage Commission who did confirm that there's no odor coming from these kiosks, which is great news to all. And they're going to do their best to hide them and make them as nice to look at as possible, possibly with some wraps like the other electrical boxes in town. We had a water commission meeting, and I learned, I didn't realize how far ahead the town is in terms of water metering compared to other communities. And so congrats to staff on that. And hopefully there'll be a way, we're exploring ways maybe that Courtney, Comox could work together to even have a grant and apply to get everyone else on a water meter. So that might be better if we work together. So that's going to be discussed, I think, at next week's Water Commission meeting. And then lastly, along with a couple others, I attended the Association of Vancouver Islands and Coastal Communities Conference, AVICC, in Victoria this past weekend. Two things to report. It was a great session on housing, lots of topics covered. And so kind of updated my own knowledge on what's coming down the pipe as well. And then happy to report that our Comox resolution that Councillor Grant proposed and that we adopted was passed unanimously, and that's to ask for more infrastructure funding when the housing boom approaching, that we're not, that we're able to pay for things like recreation, fire service, etc. So that's great news for the town, and thanks to Councillor Grant for spearheading that.
I did what he did, so I don't need to re-report, except for ABICC.
I attended ABICC as well, and I think the only thing I would add, there was a really interesting session. I think it was called Oceans. And so we learned about some incredible data actually that is available to us for free. Layers and layers of data that we can access to aid in decision making. Learned about Green Shores programs, which helps with restoration of the foreshore, and also heard from some seafood growers about some socioeconomic concerns they have with marine protected areas. It was a really insightful session. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I learned a lot about shrimp and geoduck and things I'd never learned before, but it looks like the fishermen there are looking at like 60% reductions, and there's some big concern on North Island and Northern BC on that. So sometimes it's interesting to hear of a topic that we really don't talk about here. I just wanted to send out a quick congratulations to our YQQ airport for their 20th year anniversary this week. I sometimes forget that they're only 20 years old because they're really looking at doing some pretty neat things in the next couple years, and they just announced a direct flight to Kelowna. I think it's 6 days of the week, but anyway, Comox to Kelowna is now happening, so they're continually adding routes from Comox to new destinations. And just wanted to say happy birthday to the airport, which we're super proud of having in Comox. Just a couple very quick things from ABICC. I will say I don't always get lots and lots of new information from conferences, but they had quite a bit happening. I went to a meeting that was hosted by the City of Victoria with other mayors, and they went kind of through a full discussion around they're looking at their public safety, because in Victoria that's a big thing for them right now, and they're basically looking at how much money they're putting into bylaw, different services, and looking at how they kind of relook at where that funding goes to. So it sounds like by the fall, or within the next 6 to 12 months, they're going to be really changing what their municipal services could look like, and maybe going into I would say more provincial territory. But it'll be interesting to see what they do in the capital, and I don't know how much it would apply to us, but it sounded like they were really shaking up how they're going to deal with what they called like public disorder and kind of wicked problems that they're facing. So they're really looking at how much money they're spending on those things, and they're trying to take a new approach. So without knowing what it looks like, I just thought I would note we'll be watching what Victoria does kind of in the next 12 months. They have a new mayor and 8 new councillors down there. So a big, interesting kind of situation happening. But walking around the city, there's some very beautiful spaces, and then some challenging situations that they're having to work through for everybody there. On the housing side, Lisa Helps, who's of course the kind of middle housing rep, said there is a portal coming out in the next couple weeks, which I guess she wasn't supposed to announce yet, but is now coming. And basically municipal governments can enter addresses of projects they want to work on. So if we had, let's say, a empty parking lot or a museum, or we can work with nonprofits like Legions, our museum. Anyway, there's a whole list of sites I can kind of think of would be interesting. We'll be able to potentially work with them on them funding a fair amount of housing if you work with them on social projects that include some market housing and other housing. So the portal will be interesting. I'm not sure exactly what that'll look like, but that's coming in the next couple weeks. Airbnb, just as a quick insight, of course, that's coming May 1st, and that's in the province's hands. As a municipality, we will have the ability, if people are renting their entire houses, just to send a quick email and they can be kicked off the Airbnb site if they're not registered with the town of Comox. So that's something we have not generally taken a big role in, because we don't have that many, but just got the information on if we decided to, if all of a sudden we saw a boom in those houses, we will directly have control of kind of managing them, making people angry. So there was some Airbnb information, and I think I'll leave it at that. Something else interesting that I learned that just wasn't from the conference was that when they moved the federal ridings, Comox, Nipper, North Island Powell River as we call it, we've, in our community, called Nipper, is that wrong? We've always been alone in our area, and East Courtenay got added in, and quite a few people were surprised that I didn't know that, but I didn't know that. So East Courtenay is now in our federal riding, so I thought that was, yeah, from if you cross the river. So somehow I missed that when they did the boundary extension last year, but I was interested to have learned that. That is it. Not sure what the terms are, but it opened up my eyes to what's going to be happening. Okay, I'm not going to get into some of the other stuff. So there are no media here in attendance. Do we have any questions from the public about our meeting this evening? If you you can come to the podium, Steve, and just make the light go red just for our online participation. Councillor Blackwell will do. Thank you. Welcome.
I want to thank you for discussing the Coalition on Homelessness and for bringing up the issue of funding for the future. I volunteered recently with the Caravan, and it was quite a strong experience for me to see firsthand the extent to which the Caravan works hard to support the homeless, and how the homelessness has expanded, as we're aware. And I think it's really important, as certainly mentioned today, that that this issue, in terms of support from the provincial government, is an important factor moving forward. And it'll be interesting to see after the next election, if whatever happens, we don't know, but how the issue is then dealt with subsequently, whichever party forms the government. Thanks for discussing this. It's really important. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. It's nice to see you and nice to hear. Other questions? Okay, we have no resolution to go in camera. So I will get a motion for adjournment at 5:50. The seconder, all
Second.
those in favor?